welcome. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for everybody for hanging out while we were repositioning microphones. I never knew C-SPAN like you have wired microphones. So we're wired in, we can't escape very easily. So welcome to FCC Commissioner Ana Gomez. We're so excited to have you. This is your first INCOMPAS Policy Summit in your new position.
Yes. Thank you.
So I know many of you in the room have known Commissioner Gomez for years. She's been in and around our industry, a leader in both the public and the private sector, and now you have a whole new role. So why don't you tell us a little bit about all that great experience that you have and how that informs the role that you have today?
Well, first of all, thank you very much for having me here. It's great to see everybody. I like to think that I'm homegrown. I was just telling somebody about that. So it gives me this ability to look out at the audience and see people I know and a lot of friendly faces. It's really, really quite lovely. Really enjoying my time at the FCC. It's been just a wonderful, wonderful experience. But I do have 30 plus years of experience. I hate saying it, but it's true. Working in telecom. And I understand the importance of balancing policies that protect the public interest while at the same time promote competition and innovation. And so that's how I approach everything that I'm doing, is with an eye towards that balance. I'm a firm believer in the power of competition to drive innovation that improves services and lowers prices for consumers. And I believe that a vibrant, strong, competitive telecom and media marketplace will promote U.S. prosperity while also meeting the needs of all of those consumers. So this convergence of public and private action is necessary in order to drive all these innovations that inure to the benefit of consumers. Just to keep repeating that. So to that end, in my career, I've learned a couple things. One is the importance of collaboration to reach good policy outcomes. And the second is that relationships matter. So we want to make sure that for public-private partnerships to really succeed, we have to have good collaboration, both interagency, with stakeholders, a constant conversation to understand what the impact of the policies are and how to make sure that we're driving the benefits for consumers. And then with regard to relationships, again, having the relationships to make sure that we can, in fact, reach the outcomes. We have trust in our conversations to drive specific outcomes, particularly on the interagency front and the international front, is very important.
You know, when I started working for Commissioner Clyburn a long time ago, I called my former boss, Phil Revere, to get his advice about, okay, Phil, I just started this new role with Commissioner Clyburn. She's new to the FCC. What's that one piece of solid advice you can give me? And he said, Angie, take every meeting and listen to people and ask questions. And so I think that's right in line with what you're saying. It's really important for the relationship building, for the collaboration to happen, for the public-private partnership, to succeed. So thank you for that. Did you call him too to get his advice? I recently saw you at State of the Net, where you gave a fantastic speech on the need for additional funding for the Affordable Connectivity Program. We've talked a lot about that already today, but I really would hope that you would give us your perspective on it and why you are spending so much of your time advocating for the ACP Extension Act.
Yeah, and I just listened to you very passionately support the program, which I very much appreciate, and I understand Commissioner Starks also spoke earlier in support of the program, but it is this urgent now that we do need to constantly be talking about the ACP. The Affordable Connectivity Program, or the ACP, is the most successful affordability program that we have implemented in order to close the digital divide. It's really once in a lifetime, and it's so important for all the reasons that you stated just 10 minutes ago. And I don't want to repeat everything that you said, But we are at a critical time because funding is running out. There are bills in Congress to extend the program, and I really do hope that they move forward. But besides being disastrous for the families that currently rely on the ACP in order to maintain their connectivity, in order to participate in the digital society, in the American economy, in order to be entrepreneurial, in order to go to school, in order to go to telehealth, in addition to the effect on families, I absolutely agree with you that there is an economic effect that we need to continue to talk about. The lapse in funding will have economic and competitive effects on the United States. So it will mean increasing costs for government. You talked about telehealth for seniors. Studies have shown that telehealth decreases by 23% the costs of healthcare for seniors. We will have an increase in cost to Medicaid and Medicare. Half the ACP recipients identify as military families. 4 million are seniors. What else? BEAD. You mentioned BEAD. We are providing funding to hopefully connect every home everywhere in this country. But a significant portion of that is to areas that are hard to serve because they're high cost. And so the costs are very high. They tend to be very rural. If families cannot afford to connect to broadband, what you are doing is risking stranded investment, either because the networks will be unsustainable or because companies, which is not really stranded investment now, companies may decide not to apply for funding from certain areas because it doesn't make the business case to sustain a network over the long term. So it's just so important that Congress refund this program, and I really hope that that's something that they can get done.
Yeah. What other issues are top of mind and the priorities for your time at the FCC?
So I am very focused on how technological innovation can benefit consumers. And I look at it in 4 areas. The first, of course, is connectivity, which we just talked about, making sure that everyone everywhere has access to affordable broadband service. Public safety, making sure that our first responders have what they need in order to do their jobs, and also that individual consumers get the emergency information that they need during disasters and times of emergencies. Spectrum, making sure that we have the spectrum to feed the thirst for innovation and the constant new technological marvels, but that still need that spectrum in order to be implemented. And then finally, with media, doing what we can to preserve localism and promote journalism. And all of this I do through a lens of how does this impact consumers, and how can we make sure that consumers understand what it is, what rights they have, and what kinds of benefits they can get from FCC programs. And I particularly like to look at it through the lens of historically underrepresented communities. So I want to make sure we meet consumers where they are. And so I've been really, besides continuing the drumbeat on ACP, I'm also trying to use my position in order to educate and inform consumers about all the things that all their rights and the benefits from actions that the FCC are taking.
Yeah, and that's really critical. And I know that it had been a long time since we had female representation at the FCC. With your background, right? It's important, and you have been able to reach consumers in a whole new way, and giving your statements and your speeches in Spanish to make them more accessible to consumers, which is great. I know you recently traveled to Mobile World Congress, so give us your perspective, what you learned. What did you see that most impressed you, or really, you wanted to bring back and tell us about?
Yeah, it was just last week, and I still feel like it was
still recovering.
Yes, I am still recovering. It was terrific. It's such a good conference to see a lot of technological innovations. It's fun touring the floor. I came away with a couple different impressions. First of all, artificial intelligence was everything. Every panel, every roundtable, every discussion centered around artificial intelligence. I think someone told me, I thought it was funny, that people like to raise artificial intelligence really when it's not even at issue because it's the new sexy topic. It's always, usually there's always a theme to everything. And so that was something that really stood out to me. I attended the ministerial program. And one of the things that makes Mobile World Congress actually a good program is in Barcelona is the fact that it has this ministerial. So it's an opportunity for us to meet with regulators from around the world. And I really enjoy those discussions because regulators around the world are facing the same issues that we're facing. And we have conversations about robocalls and how annoying they are and how we need to do something about robocalls and universal service and spectrum auctions. Try and think what else. Basically, everything we do, spectrum, of course. Spectrum's always a big issue, a big discussion. So this comes back to my discussion about collaboration and relationships matter. And so one thing I really appreciate about those types of conferences is the ability to connect with regulators around the world so that when it comes time to have the difficult discussions, we already have a basis of trust and know each other so that we can continue to have discussions and lead to positive outcomes.
What was the perspective of the other government officials around the world about the work that we're doing to deploy more broadband across the United States? Are they surprised to hear that the US is still behind and that we're having to spend tens of billions of dollars, like really doing the last bit of what's needed to connect everyone?
Yeah, definitely. The US is so vast. Our geography, our topography, our populations are different throughout the United States. Never mind the fact, we have islands, we have Alaska. We have just a lot of diversity in our situation. And so regulators actually appreciate the fact that we can probably empathize with them on every single aspect that they're facing because of the fact that we are so diverse and there are still hard to reach areas, hard to serve areas. But they're very interested in three things, I would say. One is deployment. Everybody wants deployment. I'm going to say four now. I'm lying. The mix of technologies. They're really interested in the work that we're doing on supplemental coverage from space. I can never remember what the acronym stands for, because they see that as a possible way to reach the absolutely unreachable. Third is affordability and how to set up a program to address that's sustainable, which is ironic given that we're talking about ACP. And fourth is power. One of the significant issues internationally for very, very unconnected countries is actually having adequate power to power their networks. So they're very interesting discussions, and they appreciate our experiences, but I appreciate their experiences as well because they are trying a lot of different things and we can also learn from them.
Right. So on deployment, we had a panel earlier that talked a bit about how the states are working with the localities and prioritizing what INCOMPAS describes as our broadband ready city checklist, right? Here are the ways that cities and towns need to get ready for the BEAD funding and, make sure that your processes are public, non-discriminatory, fast as possible, right? Reasonably priced. There's a certain role for the FCC to play in that too. And we've seen that. So thank you. You all just voted a really big order in December on pole access. There's more coming. There's a whole further notice that's pending on that where INCOMPAS is participating, but so are many others. Talk a little bit about the potential barriers to deployment and what's your perspective on how the commission can further ensure that the public funding and the private sector funding can stretch as far as possible and we can have fast, affordable deployment.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. Infrastructure is important, and funding the infrastructure is important, but we need to get it through all the permitting processes. We need to get it through the pole attachment processes with non-discriminatory access. We want to make sure that the FCC does its part to make sure that this is fast and efficient and can get done in the lowest cost way possible to stretch the dollars as much as possible. So as you mentioned, in December, we voted on a pole attachments item. We have a further notice. I'm looking forward to hearing more about actions that the FCC can take to continue to streamline our processes and continue to encourage states, localities, pole owners to make it transparent, as you said, and low cost and as streamlined as possible.
Yeah. And talk a bit about how spectrum plays into all of this too. So we've had a lapse of the FCC Spectrum Authority, and I know there's a lot of effort going into trying to bridge that gap. But then also the FCC's role, like the bands that currently are being reviewed, like the mid bands of spectrum. Discuss a little bit about how you see that helping to deliver broadband connectivity and more affordability.
I can't remember in my tenure over the last 20 years, my first few years was doing wireline. I didn't do spectrum. When we haven't been trying to find more spectrum for telecommunications uses, for repurposing, more so recently for sharing. It's a constant struggle to find spectrum to study, to affect incumbents who are in their spectrum and don't really want anybody in there with them, or worse yet, to have to move from them. So it's very important though, because we need to constantly find ways to use spectrum to its highest and best uses, but also as efficiently as possible. So I'm glad that the NTIA and I guess the White House released the National Spectrum Strategy. The FCC, of course, worked with them on that very closely. And it was a culmination of years of work to improve spectrum management practices and to identify spectrum for new uses, as well as just to continue this pushing forward to find spectrum for new and innovative services. It is getting harder and harder. It's getting harder and harder to find greenfield spectrum, at least in the mid and lower bands. And I love the fact that mid and lower keeps moving up in the spectrum chart. It used to be only below 1 gigahertz was all that could be used. Then it became 3 gigahertz. Now we're looking at 7 to 50. Anyway, technology continues to evolve too, which is good. And that technology also needs to look more at sharing. I'm convinced that sharing has to be a part of the future. We're doing sharing now. It has to be done correctly. The stakeholders involved have to cooperate for sharing to work. But that's something that we're going to have to continue working on. And the National Spectrum Strategy also talks about dynamic spectrum sharing and continuing to look at that. So there's a lot to be done with spectrum. However, Congress really needs to reauthorize our Spectrum Auction Authority, because it's all well and good if we identify spectrum for all of these new uses, but if we can't auction it, it's just going to be something we identify as a wish list, I suppose, or we're going to have to start doing the old way of assigning licenses, and nobody wants that. There's no time for that. But importantly, the thing that I don't think we focus on enough is that there's a lot of pre-auction work that goes into conducting an auction, and we can't even start that process until we get this auction authority back. So if you think about it, it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. It keeps getting pushed out further and further. Our international competitiveness relies on us to have this auction authority back.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point to be made, is we need an agency that can use all of the tools in its toolbox to meet the demands and for us to remain competitive around the world. What are the chances we're going to see Congress move on that? Do you give it a higher chance than I said on USF reform?
I am not touching that. However, I hope the chances are good. There's a lot of self-interest in having auction authority because, of course, it can be used as a pay-for a lot of really great programs if you can identify spectrum to go with it, because then it scores. So
potentially you could use some of that money to fund some of these other affordability programs like the ACP. Right?
Yeah, affordability programs, rip and replace. There's a lot of needs. Next generation 911 that could the auction authority bill or legislation could target for funding from the auctions. And again, the longer we postpone, the longer we don't have the funding for these programs.
Yeah. Thank you so much for spending your time with us this afternoon. So this was the 10th year that we've had the Policy Summit. And I can't recall if you had been before when you were in the private sector, right? But I'm like so happy that you're here in this role as our newest FCC commissioner. It's really just been such an honor to work with you over the years and all the different capacities that you have played and the importance of your contributions for the sector. And we're just so excited about your current role and wish you all the best. We're all here to help you. So please let us know how we can do that.